Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of On Mothering, which is my reflection on my parenting journey. Now, for those of you who are new to my podcast, I have an almost 3 month old baby. I had a high risk pregnancy, so I'm very fortunate that my baby is here and is thriving, so much so that his weight doubled in the past 2.5 months. So, as you can recall from my last podcast, the doctor had recommended that I moderate his feeding or stretch out his feeding a little bit more to ensure that his weight doesn't increase as drastically because he's now at the 98th percentile. The doctor said for his weight, and when he was born, he was just a little bit below average. So of course he has put on a lot of weight. But typically, the doctors say to read the baby's hunger cue, sorry, and feed on demand. And I was like, but this child was demanding just a little bit too much. So every time he demanded, I fed him, and it resulted in him just blossoming and ballooning in size, which now we have to work with or work on. I am not quite sure who is more difficult on, whether it's me or him. But the first 2 days that we did it in terms of moderating his feeding, I felt so bad for him. He was a bit miserable because he's accustomed to being fed just a little bit more often. I was, really worried that he was going to be a lot more cranky. But to be honest, he was a bit cranky, but not as bad as I thought. Like he would cry a little bit, and especially around the 2 hour mark, which is by the time that we would give him another 2 ounces of feeding. So what we're currently doing is we're giving him 4 ounces of feeding for the 3 hours rather than the 2 ounces every hour that we used to give him. So around the 2 hour mark, I realized he'll get cranky. And so what I try to do is to give him a little bit of water to see if that can soothe him. If not, then I've pulled out the good old pacifier. Now, I didn't want to use the pacifier when he was born because I was afraid he was going to get gas because he was very gassy, and I was afraid that it was going to be worse. But to be honest, I did try initially to see his reaction to it because the first night he came home, he was a bit cranky, and then I think it's because he got his vaccination and he was a little bit cranky. So I tried the pacifier then, but it just kept falling out of his mouth, falling out of his mouth. So I said, oh, this is going to be a lot more work than I really want to endure to have to put it in his mouth all the time. So I stopped. And then with the thought of it giving him gas too, I just didn't even bother with that. And so we're trying him with the pacifier, and it falls out of his mouth or he pushes out of his mouth when he's not so hungry. But we've realized that once he's hungry, which is around the 2 hour mark, then he will suck it continuously. I've also witnessed, based on my concern, I've now witnessed that he's a little bit more gassy, but it's not as bad because he doesn't suck it continuously. So it's not as bad as if he was sucking it all the time. Now, I did some reading, not research, but reading to see whether or not the pacifier will give him gas. And I also spoke to the doctor, and she mentioned that, he's going to have gas anyways, and it doesn't really make it worse per se, or it doesn't make it unbearable. So if we could use the pacifier to help him cope with the hunger, then, or at least give him something to for want of a better word, pacify him when he's hungry, then that would be good. So it's helping. Yesterday we went to the physiotherapist because he had stiffness in his leg. I forgot the scientific term or the medical term for it. And so we went to the doctor. Sorry, the physiotherapist. I'm all over the place today because I woke up early to go to a medical appointment. So we went to the physiotherapist, and he was there. He was good. I had fed him like an hour and a half before, and he was good. And I realized at the 2 hour mark he got a cranky. So I gave him the good old pacifier again, and he was very calm. They were like, "Oh, this baby is so calm. He's so well behaved." Some babies wouldn't be able to. They would be a little bit more cranky. They would be crying and would have to stop mid-session. So it's helping him, and we realize that he's so much calm. He's able to fall asleep with the pacifier, or at least self-soothe enough where he falls asleep when he has the pacifier, which is something that he didn't do before getting the pacifier. So we're pleased with it. The benefits seem to outweigh my concern in particular about him getting gas from using the pacifier. So that's good. Connected to that in terms of changes in personality, I've been really observing myself, and I realize that I don't want to say that I'm calmer, but I feel I'm a lot more passive now that I'm a mom, in the sense that um I let a lot of things slide. I let a lot of things slide. Not passive aggressive now, because I'm quite assertive, but more passive in, or I don't know what the term is really, in the sense that I let a lot of things slide, especially in the initial when I just had a baby. I was just like not more very non-reactive to things and to people, which I like. But then I'm like, oh, where's this person who normally show up and normally say her mind. But I think, like a lot of new moms or people who are busy in general, I was just, or I'm just conserving my energy. So now I have to continue observing myself to see, is this going to be a permanent change in my personality, or am I just trying to cope with being tired and the business of looking after a newborn. So especially when I go back to work and I'm teaching, especially with those bigger classes, it's going to be interesting to see if I continue this way, how I'm going to interact with the students. Um, you know, um, but I definitely think it's going to allow me to be a lot more empathetic, because I've learned a lot of lessons about, learning and taking my time to learn new things that I thought would have come easier to me, even as I continue doing my driving lessons, things that I thought um, would have I would have gotten 2 or 3 times. It's still taking a long time, and I'm like, oh, I was actually saying to myself that I should try to learn something new every school year, something that's going to challenge me, so that I can be reminded of how difficult it is to grasp some topics or some subjects, even when you're doing it multiple times. So I think that was quite a very humbling experience for me. I mentioned earlier in this recording that, or in this episode, that I went to the doctor. So, yes, I went and I got a checkup. Everything is going okay in terms of my post recovery. The gynecologist actually recommended that, should I have another baby, that I should do a cervical cerclage from pregnancy, which will be challenging, of course, for intimacy, because um, at the time I did it, I was the doctor was like, sex was a no-no. So and I mentioned cervical cerclage to others, even someone this week, and they're like, I've never heard that. So I decided that I'm gonna say just a little bit more on it, because it seems as if it's not a topic that many people talk about, or um, it's not something that's done. I still need to see, but when I do watch videos, I'm surprised that online more people seem to, talk about or want to share their experiences. But being from Jamaica, it's not as popularly known. So when I was 5 months, I was told that I was 2 centimeter dilated, and that very day I had to do emergency procedure to really sew up my cervix. And this is not being described in medical terms, so forgive me. Um, to ensure that the baby was kept in, and that procedure was relatively quickly. It was done relatively quickly. It wasn't. I don't think it was as for me. It wasn't as invasive. Probably it is. It was. I was sedated, and the healing process, was didn't take a very long time. I was able to move about, etc. Relatively easy. I was put on bed rest, although so that took a lot of. That was a new experience for me because I was always so active and always, up and about. I loved the gym. I couldn't do any form of gymming or any type of physical activity, especially for the first couple weeks. I had to go to the doctor every week to check in, to check whether the cerclage was holding, whether the stitches were okay. And that carried through to the most of my pregnancy. I think for some people, it carries through until the baby is around 32 weeks or thereabout, when they're at a comfortable stage, in terms of what in terms of whether the cerclage will break or not. Okay, here my baby crying, so I'm going to pause and then I will continue. Oh, this thing is done. Okay, so when I paused, I was talking about the surgical cerclage. I think based on how things go, I'll get a professional to come and discuss what that is, just for the sake of explaining it in more medical terms. I also, with the cerclage, took progesterone to help, my service, etc. Uh, I now have the baby with me, so you might hear him make some noise in the background. I've just fed him, I burped him, so I'm going to wrap up very quickly. I was thinking and thinking and saying to myself, I needed something to do as if I'm not busy. So I actually started my YouTube channel, in which I'll be looking at research and talking about educational matters, just to keep myself occupied as well. So the channel is called Shawnee Speaks. I will also have the podcast on YouTube eventually, so you'll be able to access it there as well. I think I'm going to pause now before the baby starts getting a little bit restless. Are you going to get restless? No, you're not. You're going to be good. Okay, so I'm going to pause and end the recording here, the episode here, and then I will see you next week. Oh, you're saying bye? I'll see you next week for another episode. Bye.